Testing, testing. Three. Hey guys, hey. It's Nikayla here, and I just got so excited. Once that live button turns on, I just am so excited to start tonight's class. So come on in, and also shout out to the replay viewers. Um, if you don't know, my name is Nikayla, and you guys are all in the right place. If you are here for the How to Stand Out as a Podcaster Masterclass. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second so I can see as you guys enter and make sure you're all good. If you have any questions tonight, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. I am definitely going to get to the Q&A tonight. So make sure it's in that section so I can just go over there later and answer them all. All right. So now I am sharing my screen with you guys. And again, we're about to jump into how to stand out as a podcaster. My name is Nikayla Matthews Okome. I'm the host of a podcast called Side Hustle Pro. And if you don't know, I'm going to share a little bit about my journey into podcasting tonight, as well as my goal is really for you guys to understand three things, really. So first of all, I want you guys to know the three things you should stop doing when trying to stand out as a podcaster and what you should be doing instead. I also am going to share with you an easy way to get listeners so that they stay connected and your show grows faster. And then finally, I'm going to get into my favorite strategies to make money from your podcast that you can start using right away today. All right. And then, of course, I'm going to talk about how you can continue to get coaching from me inside of the Podcast Moguls program, if that is of interest to you. All right. So one more time, let me just make sure, okay, this is recording, and I will share my screen and we'll jump into it. All right. So let me just see who's in the building real quick. Feel free to drop your name, where you're coming in from. I love to see where you guys are joining from. All right. So by the way, if you stay until the end tonight, like I said, we are going to have Q&A. So if you're just joining, I did send out that reminder email, like we're starting now. So if you're just popping in, we are going to have Q&A. I'll be answering specific questions. Thank you, Zico from CT from Connecticut, Angel from Houston, Selena. All right. Active group tonight. I love it. I see all your messages. All right. So feel free to jump in the chat or Q&A at any point. My team member, Joanna, will be there to support you with any responses, and then Q&A time, I'll dive right in. All right. Another thing, if you stay until the end, I have a free Libsyn promo code for you to get started today and get all the rest of this month and next month free to start up your show. So if you haven't launched yet, or even if you have, you can switch over to Libsyn and actually host your show for free. So stay until the end for that. All right. So like I said, let me know who's here, not just your name. Now, I want to know a little bit more about what brings you here. So I came up with these three buckets based on the responses to that "What's your why" email. So let me know which one you're in, 1, 2, 3. So like number one, you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while, but you're kind of overwhelmed with how to start. Number two, you and your friends have a podcast idea and you want to make sure you do it right. Or number three, you have already started your podcast or you're right about to start and want to make sure that you're being strategic. So let me know what your feelings are. Okay, so we have a mixture, 1, 3s. Cool. Okay. So again, you're all in the right place. There are a number of ways that you might feel right now as you're getting ready to launch your show, or if you have a show already and it's not doing the numbers that you want. So I'll be helping you guys through all of that. And one thing I am going to do, though, is a little bit of a rewind, because in case you don't know my own journey, I think it can be helpful for you guys to know where I started from. So quick sip of my water, right? Because I'm be talking a lot. So for me, I started podcasting in 2016. That's when I launched Side Hustle Pro. And since then, it has amassed over 9 million downloads and multiple 6 figures in sponsorship every year. And while I was doing that, it was my side hustle. So at the time I was working for NPR and I led the digital marketing for top podcasts like How I Built This, Code Switch, and many more of your favorites. So it was very serendipitous. And overall, I have over, at this point, 15 years of experience as a marketer. And then after launching my show in 2016, in 2017, I was able to quit my job at NPR to podcast full time. And I have been going strong ever since. I'm entering my 6th year this year, right? So this is a little update episode that I shared when I did that. So you can scroll back to my podcast, the December 2017 episode, the December 27th, 2017 episode, to hear all about what went into my decision and how I was able to get to that place and move forward. So then, I quit. I'm podcasting full time, just chugging along, doing my work. 5 years later, 2022, Side Hustle Pro was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. And I mean, that memory is still so surreal to me. Like, I still just can't believe it because it's just such an honor. And on the fun side, I was born in JA. Let me know if there's any Jamaicans in the building, any Yardies. I grew up in the Boogie Down Bronx. So all of that informs my personality, which is what you have to showcase in your podcast, no matter what kind of podcast you do. So what I love about podcasting is that podcasting gave me freedom and flexibility. And when I had that job, I had very few vacation days, but podcasting allowed me to quit my job and go on the honeymoon of my dreams, which is where I am. In the picture on the left, I'm here in this picture in Zanzibar on my honeymoon, and I delayed it for a year because I didn't have enough vacation days. So for me, one of the things that I value most about being able to podcast full time is not having to ask anybody to go on a trip or vacation. And also the ability to work from anywhere. So my husband Moyo and I are both certified side hustlers. We're juggling parenting, careers, and our many, many entrepreneurial passions and side projects. So flexibility is huge for us. So let me know if this is you as well, if you're really looking for the flexibility and the opportunity to be more flexible that comes with podcasting. So when I had a job, like I said, I had little vacation. I also had little to no family leave, but podcasting allowed me to stay home with my son for 24 whole months while earning an income. Now, I didn't know I would be home with him for 24 months. The pandemic helped out with that. However, it was nice to be able to do so without the stress of also juggling, a corporate job. So it might seem all cushy, all smooth and all of that, but I want you to know that's not the case at all. On the road to podcasting, while I have done a lot of things right, I've also done a whole lot of things wrong. And this includes like how I even started this journey. So in May 2015, this was me. I'm sitting in front of the University of Michigan, Ross School of Business. I'm graduating with my MBA, and it looks like I'm set, right? I got my cap and gown on. I look happy, but inside, I'm actually freaking out, you guys. You can't tell behind this smile, but I'm freaking out because I was rejected at that point from my Google internship that I'd had the summer between my first and second years. Thought I was going to get the full-time job, didn't. And therefore, I was graduating with no job, no money, and I was moving back to DC to live with my then boyfriend, now husband, with no income, okay? Barely any savings, no income. It was all bad. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what my next job was. I really didn't. But I said to myself, I got to do something. So for me, that something was blogging. I started blogging. I started pouring myself out into just building my personal brand. I knew I wanted to, quote unquote, build this personal brand, but what was that? What did that even mean? I didn't know. Do you know? I did, though, what I do anytime I'm confused or want to learn more. I look to people who were further ahead on the journey. So I started following online branding coaches, and some of you might be here for that reason, right? So I'm not from the DMV, but I was in the DMV at the time. Somebody said, I didn't know you were from the DMV. I was actually just moved back to New York, where I'm from the Boogie Down Bronx, remember? And at the time I was living in the DMV, we were figuring it out, and I started following online branding coaches, and that inspired me to launch my blog. And as you can see, it was capital T tacky. I was making these images in Canva. Canva back then wasn't what it is now. Like, you had to really, DIY it a bit more. You didn't have those cute templates. So I had the tackiest blog of all time and I had content, right? I was getting closer, but I didn't really have a purpose. I didn't know where I was going. But the important thing was that I got started. And I want to commend all of you guys for being here tonight, because I imagine that many of you are in the same boat, whether you have started your podcast or not. The important thing is that you have gotten started and you can tweak along the way, no matter what boat you're in right now. So that's the important thing I learned. You have to be willing to take the first step, even when you don't know where it will lead. Nobody can give you a crystal ball and say, oh, if you start this podcast on this date, by this day, you'll have this many dollars and blah, blah, blah. You just have to be willing to take that first step. So for me, I continued blogging. And after a while, I realized the common thread for me. Everybody, we're all going to have different interests. So for me, I love sharing the stories of Black women side hustlers and entrepreneurs. And that's when the idea for my podcast, Side Hustle Pro, was born. So from there, it really took off. And you guys, you got to understand, a year before launching Side Hustle Pro, I didn't even know what a podcast was. I listened to my first podcast in 2015, and then a year later in 2016, I launched Side Hustle Pro. And then a year later, launching that podcast in 2016, the first 7 days after launching Side Hustle Pro, I landed in the top charts with Side Hustle Pro. Here it is on the left, top 10 in marketing, and on the right, number 37 in business. And, fun fact, I'm here on these charts in the same row or a little bit above people who I had turned to learn about building my personal brand. It's people like Amy Porterfield specifically, whose podcast, I still listen to. So it was just surreal seeing myself on those charts. And not only that, but I said, okay, the reception is so amazing. I knew that there was interest. I had done my pre-work. I'd done research beforehand, surveys, gotten on the phone with people, but I didn't know that the reception would be what it was. And so I said, okay, let me build on this momentum. So I went hard on promotion that summer. You can see I printed up Side Hustle Pro t-shirts, and we're going to talk about ways to make money from your show. And we'll talk about merch in a little bit later. But for me, that was the first merch I created. I went on this conference circuit promoting my show. And the more and more I did that, I realized that I was onto something. And if I took this seriously, I could quit my job. So that appealed to me. I don't know what your major why is. That's why I asked that question before you joined today's call. But for me, I wanted to leave my job. I knew if I wanted to leave my job, I needed to make money. So I started studying podcast monetization. And I invested in courses to learn. So one of those courses I invested in was a 2-day event sponsorship intensive. So keyword here is event. It was not podcast specific. When I went, they didn't really even know anything about podcasting, but I thought, okay, if I can just learn more about sponsorship and how that works, it'll be worth it to me. So I invested my hard-earned $1,197 because I was that eager to learn. And 6 months after doing that, and after launching my podcast, I pitched my very first sponsor cold. And I earned my first $4,000 podcast sponsorship contract. So you guys, that's almost 4xing what I invested. And that is in a short time frame. Okay. I was blown. I was like, if I can do this, I just need to 5x my effort, right? To be able to make enough to leave my job. So I kept on that momentum. Side Hustle Pro was featured on Apple, right? I'm being featured on the Today Show, Forbes, Oprah Magazine. I did my own live show. I just dropped my phone, y'all. I did my own live show 3 years after launching my podcast. And all of this leads me to today's workshop, where I want to share with you how I went from graduating with no job and no money to the Podcast Hall of Fame and all of this success in podcasting. So I started out, by the way, as an independent podcaster, and I'm now on a major podcast network. I'm on the HubSpot network, and they were attracted and brought me on because of what I've done on my own. So I'm going to share with you those things right now. So pull up your camera to screenshot, pull up your notebook, your pen, all of that, grab your water, because we're about to get into it, okay? Let's go. So I want to share 3 main tips tonight, okay? Tip number 1 are actually the 3 things you should stop doing when trying to stand out as a podcaster and what you should do instead. Then tip 2 is an easy way to get listeners so that they stay connected and your show grows faster. And tip 3 are my favorite strategies to make money from your podcast that you can start using right away. Whether you're getting ready to launch or you haven't launched yet, you can bookmark these tips and start using them as soon as you launch. So let me break it down. Tip number 1, the 3 things you should stop doing when trying to stand out as a podcaster and what to do instead, okay? So I want you to stop doing this. Stop keeping your podcast super broad so you don't put yourself in a box. Also, stop starting a general conversation podcast with the homies and making your podcast title vague or a play on words. And then finally, stop launching in-person video podcasts before you even master audio podcasting. And I know you're like, why, Nikayla, what are you talking about? This is what's working right now. Here's what happens when you do those things. You make it hard for people to find your show when searching for topics you discuss. And you make it hard for people to know what your show is even about. And if they don't know what it's about, how can they know it's for them? All right, with these vague titles, with these just general things. And then finally, you waste a lot of money before you start making any money from your show. So I know a lot of people, like, you get excited and you want to just throw all this money on your show into branding and lights, camera, action, video sets. But why waste that money before you start making any money from your show? So here's what you should do. Here's what you should do instead. First and foremost, you have to get clear on what your show is going to be about and who it's for. Don't be afraid to pick a niche, aka your show's angle, but don't over niche either. It's a sensitive line, I know. So for example, I have a niche, aka I talk to Black women entrepreneurs who started as side hustlers. Over niching might be, I want to talk to Black women side hustlers, Black women entrepreneurs who started as side hustlers and now have a beauty business, right? That's very hard to only talk to beauty entrepreneurs, but there are plethora across all industries. I'm now 353 episode deep, and I'm not stopping anytime soon, right? Because I was able to niche, but I didn't over niche. So that's just one example. And make it easy for people to find you and know what your show is about. Back to number 2 for a second, because this is the hardest thing I know for a lot of people to do. We could talk more about it in Q&A. Niche down doesn't mean you have to niche by race. It doesn't mean you have to niche by gender. It just means you truly have to know who you are talking to. And then that person is representative of the audience. It doesn't mean you won't have other people who listen to your show. Like, I have people of all races and all genders who listen to my show, but my show, it's clear who it's about. So they know to share it with that person, and that person finds it when they're looking for it. So here is, by the way, how your favorite conversational podcast niche down. So even they are known for their angle. You might think, oh, but I want to start a broad conversational podcast, Nikayla, like The Read does it, the Friend Zone does it, Earn Your Leisure does it. Well, here's what they do to make it niched, okay? They have an overarching thread that unites the various topics they may touch on. For example, adulting as Black women. They also let you know exactly what to expect by keeping a format. They use segments to have a format. So each and every show, you know what to expect. So if you listen to one episode and you like it, you're going to tune in again, because you can't wait to hear those segments. You can't wait to hear what's called the trash on some of these shows, where they talk about pop culture and gossip and all the funny stuff that happened during the week, right? You can't wait to hear that. Then you'll hear something, more educational. So that is called niching down. That is called making your show have an angle. They also consistently speak about certain subjects. So for example, pop culture news, business, entertainment, dating, and relationships within those segments. Now, I'm not saying they touch on all of these, and it's very hard to touch on all of these, but if you do, it has to be through a common lens. All right. And so as a result of all of these things, their audience knows exactly what to expect when they tune in. So to go back for a second, you have to get clear on what your show is about. Who is it for? And then don't be afraid to niche down. Don't over niche, and then make it easy for people to find you and know what your show is about. If not from your title, then from your descriptions. So getting grown, I love, because, you know, the audience that they're speaking to, you already know that audience knows what that term means, or they have an inkling from the getting and the grown. And then they make it even clearer when they say learning how to adult for real. Anybody can say adulting, but when you say learning how to adult for real, that again is a clue to their target audience, in addition to their faces, right? We're like, okay, these Black girls look like my friends. So those are some of the subtle ways in which you truly start to make sure your audience knows who your show is for, what it's about, what they can expect. And by the way, I share these tips because I went through this. I made all the mistakes before I come to y'all. And so I'm sharing from my experience so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. So when I started my blog, I used a play on words, right? The thing I tell you stop doing. I used a play on my name, Kayla K Speaks. I thought it was cute. It didn't mean anything. Nobody was finding that when they were searching for it. No one could pronounce it because people can't read. And as a result, I was not seeing the traction and website visitor rate that I wanted to see. In addition, I was all over the place. I was touching on everything and everything in your mama. Like I was just trying to talk about everything in life. Once I started to see the common thread of what I was interested in and what I wanted to really make my show about, it's become more streamlined. It's a show about Black women entrepreneurs who started as side hustlers. So most recent episode here's a example of the kind of graphic you'll see on my Side Hustle Pro social media channels, how CultureCon CEO Imani Ellis went from side hustling VP to full-time entrepreneur. This is what the show is about. You know exactly what to expect when you look at this graphic, and that's what I want for your audience as well. They shouldn't be left guessing. They should know what your show is about, all right? So I'm not the only one who went through this play on words. Another big mistake that people like to do is name their show after them, because you're like, hey, right, I'm gonna name my show after me. I'm building my brand. Wrong. Big horn. If I had it, if I had like that big red button, like no, wrong. So this was Erica McAfee. She's a Podcast Moguls alum. She has a show about pregnancy and infant loss. And in the beginning, it was named Erica and McAfee Podcast. And through working together, she revamped her show to be titled Sisters-in-Laws Podcast. And so there's subtle things that work here that lend itself to people understanding what this show is going to be about. You know, it's something related, again, to sisters. You know who sisters are. You know from her face, warm, welcoming face, that is probably about, you know, something related to Black women. You know, in loss, you're like, okay, getting closer. What kind of loss do we talk about? It's something about grief, but what kind of grief? And then her descriptions, you know, her show description and her episode titles do the rest of the work. So a lot of people get stuck on this point and they think, I mean, they have to like really make their title literal and there's no room for creativity. You can be creative, but don't lose your audience trying to be so different that they can't even find you. So it's very important that you make it easy for people to find you. If people are searching for Black Women Side Hustle Podcast, Side Hustle Pro will come up. If people are searching for Pregnancy Loss Podcast, Sisters in Loss will come up. Because it starts with your podcast name, it starts with your podcast description, and it starts with your episode titles. And these are all things you have control over. So let's recap my first tip real quick, okay? To stand out as a podcaster, you have to establish your angle, AKA, you know, there are things you should stop doing, and here's the things that you should start doing instead. Get clear on what your show is about and who it's for. Don't be afraid to pick a niche, AKA your show's angle, but don't over niche and make it easy for people to find you and know what your show is about. You got me? All right. Naya says, got you, or Nia. And Erica says, that's beautiful. I love her rebrand. It's so clear, isn't it? I love her rebrand as well. And I mean, her website, everything has just like, every year she just upgrades it, and it's just so beautiful, especially for that topic. It really is inviting and helps people to find that safe space. So tip number 2, an easy way to get listeners so that stay connected and your show grows faster. So this is one of my favorite tricks that I use and still use whenever I'm building up a new platform or channel. So here's what most people think, right? And by the way, this tip is me teaching you how to use Instagram to find your listeners before you launch, and how to gain your first 1,000 downloads and how to keep growing from there. And if you're really, really good and really master this, you can actually apply this on TikTok and Twitter as well. So most people think that you need a lot of followers on Instagram to promote anything. Most people even think you need your Instagram feed to be perfectly color coordinated with filtered photos in the perfect sequence. And then finally, a lot of people think that, you need everything to be perfect all the time. And here's what happens when you think that. You don't even try to create content. You miss out on opportunities to share with your audience or make money, and your audience and opportunities remain stagnant. So I'm going to get straight to it. Here's what you need to do instead, okay? Focus on just getting in front of the right followers. What do I mean by the right followers? I mean the people who will be interested in your podcast. These are the people that will click the link in your bio, and that's going to grow your podcast downloads. So really quick Podcast Moguls case study to demonstrate how to build your podcast audience by targeting the right followers on Instagram. So I want you to meet another Podcast Moguls alum. Her name is Ashley. She hosts the Stacks in the City podcast, or hosted because she's moved on, and I'll show you what she's moved on to. So Ashley used what I have coined the Side Hustle Pro OMG formula to gain her first 1,000 downloads. When she joined the program, she was well under 1,000. And through doing the OMG formula, she was able to scale up to that. So the O and the M and the G stand for a step. So step number 1 is O, obsessively audit, you guys. Don't just use this Instagram platform. Don't just let them use you, okay? Use it by studying what is working on similar accounts with a similar goal. Ashley is she started out as a personal finance podcast and wanted to help Black women with just understanding budgeting, wealth building, and all of this stuff from a young age. So there are hashtags you can study for Black women in finance, or whatever it is you want to podcast about. There are other people who are further ahead of you who you can study to understand what resonates with this audience. If you have that similar audience, you have to find people that have a similar audience. What's resonating? How is the content structured? How do they want to be spoken to? Now, we don't do this to copy or be an imitation. We do this to get some examples of content types we can try. So if we're doing infographics with like a gallery of information, if we're doing a static post, if we're doing reels, like you're studying this to understand what kind of content types might work for your audience and the information you're trying to share. Then step 2 is the M in OMG, which is make friends. I actively encourage you guys, when you start an Instagram business profile for your podcast, to think about social media networking like real life networking. No one knows you exist. There's this huge platform. No one knows that you're out there. You're getting lost in the sauce right now. You have to actually go out there and work for your followers. So you need to introduce yourself to people with a follow. This is not follow for follow. Like, you're actually identifying people. And I help you even more with this in Podcast Moguls. You're identifying who your audience is, and then you're finding that person and introducing yourself to them by following them. And then what happens when you do this right is that they actually thank you for following them. So this is an example of what happens when I started doing OMG. And I save these screenshots because I want you to see the power of this. So at the time the Nakira Show wrote, listening in now. I don't know how you found me on IG, but thank God you did. My work days will be spent catching up on past podcasts. So when you do that work to really understand who your person is, and you find them, they're happy that you found them so that they can go binge listen to your podcast. All right. And this is another one I got. They said, OMG, your friend request really brightened my day. I love your podcast. I actually binge listen to them and they're wonderful. Keep it up, girl. So this is someone who, again, was in my audience, happened to already be following me, but that's great as well, because now we can build a deeper connection by being connected on Instagram as well. Do not underestimate the power of being actually connected with the people who are listening to your show. It is such a powerful, powerful thing. So the last step in OMG is the G, go over the data. Data is your friend. Again, when you start a podcast, a profile for your podcast, make sure it's a business profile, and then you'll be able to see insights. So this is just like a generic insights, but insights on Instagram will show you things like your follower breakdown, how much you're growing day over day, week over week, month over month. It'll show you the breakdown in gender, age range, where they are based primarily, and so much more, when they're active, what they've engaged with the most. Because if you see that they're engaging with certain type of post the most, you're going to make it your business to do more of that content. You're not going to fill your whole page with that content. Some people do, but you have to at least understand what type of content types work for your person. So for Ashley, here's what happened as a result when she did OMG. So she went from having 758 to 1,216 Instagram followers in less than 8 weeks in Podcast Moguls. And Stacks in the City, the podcast, went from 300 to 1,400 monthly downloads in less than 8 weeks. So like I said, she was well under 1,000 and scale to over 1,000 in the program. And this is very powerful, because once you cross that 1,000 downloads threshold, then we're really talking in terms of revenue generating opportunities. So, and in case you weren't keeping count of that jump, in case that looks small to you, that's actually a 4x jump. So let me know if you would like that for your show, a 4x jump in listenership. So why is getting in front of the right followers so important? Well, because as your followers grow, so do your downloads, and so does your audience. And Stacks in the City landed in the top business charts on Apple Podcasts during this time that she was aggressively doing OMG. So there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts now in the business category. So for you to be in the top 200, which is like kind of where they cap the chart, that is just super impressive, and it's very, very hard to do. And again, this is something she accomplished by following this formula. So I highly recommend it. And so I mentioned that, now she's gone on to do bigger things with her platform. So the beauty of using a podcast to build a platform is you can really take it in any direction. So for Ashley, she's expanded her personal brand and income generating opportunities beyond podcasting. She does things like live speaking events, webinars and workshops about house hunting and wealth building, and all the things that she specializes in, because she has so many properties, again, at such a young age, and she knows so much about real estate. So she's been able to do amazing things like this because of the audience she built because of podcasting. And that, by the way, the podcast is also an authority builder. So people recognize and take your advice more seriously when they're able to hear over and over again, episode after episode, and say, oh, this person knows their stuff. Oh, this person has the receipts. So that is one of the most powerful things about podcasting. So as your downloads grow, so do your opportunities. So quick check-in time. Is this helpful for you guys? Give me a yes in the chat if it is. If you're raising your hand, if you have any questions, just head on over to the Q&A section and drop your question. All right. Remember, this is going to be interactive. So Q&A is going to happen, and just put your questions all over there. All right. Cool beans. Let's get into the last tip of the night. Really quick though, let me recap that. So to start building a big audience, you need to target the right followers. That was obsessively auditing, making new friends, going over the data in the OMG formula. So now let's get into tip number 3. My favorite strategies to make money from your podcast that you can start using right away. I'll teach you how to set yourself up to get there. So here's how to actually make money from podcasting. There's a lot of misunderstandings out there, and some people are in the dark about it, but before you do anything, you actually need to get to know your listeners. If you don't know who listens to your show, you can't create a product for them. No one's buying anything from you if you are not talking directly to them and you haven't learned what they need. And if you don't know who listens to your show, you can't pitch sponsors either, because they want to know who they're talking to. You can't just say, hey, I have this show, I have this many downloads, give me money. They're going to be like, okay, cool. Who's your audience? Who you listen to your show? So you have to start by listening to your listeners. There are many ways that you can do this. Surveys, getting on the phone with a select group of people, cohort of people, and you can learn what are their challenges, what are their needs, what products do they talk about, what conferences do they attend, what services do they use, what questions do they have. Sometimes, actually not sometimes, a lot of times people will start to ask you those questions because you get to know them on Instagram. They'll start to DM you, they'll put questions under your posts, they'll write you emails. So that's one of the easier ways to start to get to know more about your audience. But you also have to do proactive work as well. You can create a Facebook community, and you can put a call to action at the end of every episode or in your show notes and say, hey, can you fill out this quick survey? Whatever you need to do, because you gotta get to know who is listening to your show. So now when you actually know who's listening to your show, you have a few options. So again, these are my favorite. There are a plethora of ways to make money, but these are my favorite. Number one is you can create a valuable product or service and talk about it on your show. So right now, if you listen to Side Hustle Pro podcast, all the last few months, I've been encouraging people to sign up for my webinar and learn more about podcast moguls, because this is my valuable product and service. I provide podcast coaching. I provide an amazing podcast course. I've coached now over almost 400 podcasters on how to build and grow their podcast. And it's something I'm very passionate about. And so that's one way that you can make money. You can be your own advertiser and promote something that you have created, a product or a service. Option 2, speaking of products, is merch. You can develop merchandise products that your listeners love and need. And I share this screenshot from the products on the Read website, because they're just so clever and so catchy, and even down to their logo. Their logo is beloved, and people will buy a t-shirt or a sweatshirt or a hat with that. And also some of their favorite sayings, like Crystal will say, break up with him. And that's become a catchy line that people love because they've heard it so many times from her, or words mean things. So once you start to get into your rhythm, you might have sayings that start to come out of your show. After you've developed your show, you might have a phrase that you want to just amplify for your community, an affirming phrase or a funny phrase, and you can start to make merch. So that's one of the ways that you can make money. Another option is to create a paid subscription. Nowadays, this is getting more and more popular. Everybody is creating a subscription. Well, not everybody. Side Hustle Pro doesn't have a subscription yet. I don't know. I'll let you guys, I'll keep you guys updated if you're a part of Podcast Moguls, what I'm thinking there. But you have options with a membership. You can provide bonus content and have different tiers. So people might pay $7.99 and you can share what they'll get if they pay for that tier, or you can pay even more and be a premium member and get even more exclusive content and other things. The beauty of this is you get to decide what's in the subscription, and you can take a look. If you go onto Patreon and search under podcast, you can get ideas for things to do in your different tiers. And before I get into the fourth way, I just want to remind you guys that there's so many ways to make money, but all of them are hard. All of them require a lot of work. So you really have to think through, okay, what do I want to explore first and why? And you have to give it time to work, because of course, when you first create merch, if you're selling a $25 t-shirt, and your audience is only so big, you might not see a big bunch of revenue from that for a while. So you really have to think through what you want to do, and make sure you're going to give it enough time to work and to scale. So finally, option 4 is you can pitch brands that your listeners will love and need. And remember, anytime you pitch a brand, they're going to want to know the demographics for your show audience. They're going to want to know how many listeners you're getting on average per episode. And then again, they're going to want to know, who are these people that are listening? What's their age, gender, location, occupation, interests? Because they want to know that if I go in front of this audience, they will buy, they will sign up, they will subscribe, or whatever their call to action is. So I started pitching sponsors 6 months into podcasting, again, landed my first $4,000 contract and kept going from there. These are actually 3 brands that I have worked with on the Side Hustle Pro podcast. And I knew my audience. I knew that my audience were side hustlers and freelancers. So they need things like Skillshare to keep working on their skills, FreshBooks to do their invoicing on their own, and Squarespace to build their website. So I always had my audience in mind when I think about brands that I wanted to align myself with, because 1, I have to stand for it and vouch for it and truly believe in it. And 2, I truly do care about my audience and want to give them value, because the more you give people value, the more they keep coming back. So again, all of these things are some of my favorite ways. I've tried all of them except for subscription so far, but that might be coming. And to set yourself up to do any one of these things and make money as a podcaster, you, number 1, have to launch your show. And then you have to grow your show. You have to grow your show using OMG and the additional marketing methods I teach inside of Podcast Moguls, because the bigger your audience, the more the higher your revenue potential. Only a small percentage of your audience is going to become customers right away. So you can't just rely on, I have 1,000 customers, I can make this amount of money. Like, no, you have to keep on growing your show and growing your audience. And then you just need to decide on your revenue path, but try one at a time and give it time. So if creating a service, start small and test to make sure that it's something your listeners really need. If creating a product, start with 1 to 2 products at a time. Don't go in there with like 10 products on your website. If creating a paid subscription, research the market to decide what to include and what fellow podcasters charge for subscription tiers. And if pitching sponsors, develop a media kit and start cold pitching. And by the way, I provide my actual emails that I send to sponsors, as well as a pricing calculator, so you can know how to price your show when you're first starting out and you're smaller. And I share all of that inside of Podcast Moguls. So let's do a quick rewind before we get into Q&A for the night. How to stand out as a podcaster with no prior experience. We went over the 3 things you should stop doing when trying to stand out as a podcaster and what to do instead. We went over an easy way to get listeners so that they stay connected and your show grows faster. And we went over my favorite strategies to make money from your podcast that you can start using right away. So all of these things, I know we went over a lot of things. So right now you guys might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed. You want to launch and grow your podcast, but you're trying to do everything at once, everything I just said all at once. Or you might even feel stuck. Let me know, let me know if you're overwhelmed, stuck in the comments. You might feel like your podcast is not growing fast enough or getting enough downloads. And you know that it's probably the lack of a proven blueprint that is holding you back. Or you might feel determined. You know the value of having a powerful platform like a regular podcast, and you're ready to do what it takes to grow it. So again, let me know, are you stuck? Are you overwhelmed? Are you determined? Which one are you? Let me know. Overwhelmed but excited. Gab says, show me the moolah. Ivini or Wivini, so sorry if I mispronounce your name. I have a hard name, so I know I hate that, but you tell me how you spell it phonetically. So you say, do you have a mentorship program? Yes, I do. I'm so glad you mentioned that, right? So tonight, you guys, you are invited, all of you guys, into Podcast Moguls. And again, this is optional. Option one, you can keep trying to DIY your podcast with tips gathered all over social media and YouTube. Or option two, you can decide to make podcasting a priority for you this year and use my proven roadmap that tells you exactly where to start and what steps to take. So you are, like I said, you're all invited to join Podcast Moguls. If you're wondering, why do I need a coach? Well, I have done it all, and I have made it from indie podcaster, doing it as a side hustler, to full-time podcaster, to podcast Hall of Fame, and podcaster on a network where I get paid, to podcast. So if this is of interest to you, I'm able to share my path so that you don't have to flounder, wonder, oh, does this work? Does that work? Should I listen to this person? Like, I have the proven receipts for you, and you know that you can trust me because I've actually done it. I've done those steps. So let me share a little bit more about Podcast Moguls if you're interested in my coaching and mentoring. So Podcast Moguls is an accelerator program, aka mentoring program, that teaches my proven effective marketing strategies to podcasters who want to have a hit podcast, grow a larger following, and make money from their podcasts. So Podcast Moguls is for you if you want to get access to that inner circle of podcast business advice that I will give you. It's also for you if you just want to learn simple and effective ways to promote your podcast and grow your audience fast. It's also for you if you want to learn how to pitch podcast sponsors at any podcast size. And it's for you if you want to make money from your podcast and not just do it as a hobby. So inside of the program, there are three parts to it. There's the course itself. Like if you join tonight, you can log in and you can start going through these lessons. There's an 8-step podcast success curriculum, which includes video lessons, tutorials, templates, swipe files, and guides. And these are the modules all here. There are 8 modules. You'll learn everything from the fundamentals, which go over equipment. Module 1, refine your topic, find your perfect listener. Module 2, position your podcast. Module 3, launch your podcast. Module 4, market your podcast through growing your Instagram reach. Module 5, market your podcast by growing your email list. Module 6, market your podcast through Facebook and Instagram advertising 101. And then module 7, monetize by positioning your podcast. And then finally, create your winning pitch. So this is where I share my templates and my pitches and the calculator, all of that good stuff. So that's part 1. That's the course itself. Then part 2 is the community. So when you join Podcast Moguls, you join a community of fellow podcasters who've all been going through the same things that you're going through, who have experienced some of the similar challenges. So finally, you have your people, right? You're able to brainstorm, throw ideas against the wall, say, hey guys, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? People also love sharing their wins inside of the community. This is a screenshot when Felicia from the Trill MBA show made it to number 53 in iTunes careers. And she was just so excited. She was like, I'm coming for the top 200 in overall business next. And she said, hashtag thanks, Nikayla. So part 3 is the coaching itself. Again, that's the mentorship component. You meet monthly with me live for video group coaching calls. So as you can see, we actually are in there, we're seeing each other's faces, and you receive personal guidance from me. And I'm answering your questions and you're learning what's working in real time. I'll say, hey guys, I'll switch to this platform, or I'm using this to do my Instagram snippets now, and I'm using this for my transcription tool, and here's what's working. And I'm giving that all to you in real time. We also do deep dives on topics. So Here, I had my editor, Chris, come in and share some deep dive information on editing, and people were able to ask all their editing questions. And this is actually saved. So if you log in tonight, join Podcast Moguls, log in tonight, you can go to this lesson, and I guarantee you it has some of your editing questions in there. So a little bit more about the coaching. So I don't want to be the only one speaking about this. So I've shared some of the feedback from my Podcast Mogul students. This one is from Shirley McAlpine. She's the host of the She's Got Drive podcast. And she shared, I only started implementing her marketing strategies about 3 months ago, and this is what I found. I had at that point 25,000 downloads, and in the last 3 months, I'm now at 46,000 downloads. Her strategy absolutely works. So direct impact from the mentorship given inside of Podcast Moguls from me. So in 3 months, Shirley almost doubled her downloads simply by following the instructions. And Fritz of the Coin Gamma podcast, another person who has used their podcast beyond and to build a platform beyond podcasting. He joined. He was just expecting to learn like the technical things about making his podcast better. But through growing his show, he was able to speak at over 5 conferences, even was flown out internationally to speak at conferences. And it all came because of his podcast and because of the steps he took from what he learned in Podcast Moguls to grow his show. So just to break it down a little bit of what you get inside of Podcast Moguls, you get monthly live coaching sessions from me. You get annual community access. And the monthly live coaching sessions, these are based on, you technically get 4 sessions, but honestly, I never turn anyone away. If you're in the program, you're a student for life. So, a one-on-one session would be 1,000 and you're getting 4 of these, but really way more than 4 because you can join at any time. You're getting annual community access. I know groups who actually charge $197 a month to be a part of their communities, their private communities. And this is not annual. This is every single year, every single month. But that's included inside the program at no additional charge. You're also getting all of my sponsorship pitch letters and my media kit, which you guys know that I paid $1,197 just for that portion. And again, it's all included in one flat fee. Plus, you'll get my guest pitch templates. So the templates I use to reach out to people and land some of the major guests that I've had on the show who don't know me in real life, who came on the show because of these emails. That by itself is a $597 value. You'll find that on the market for upwards of that, but that's included inside of the program. Plus, when you invest, you'll also get the Master the Gram program. So this is my OG program that shares and teaches you how to build an engaged audience on Instagram. And that's included. If you go right now to Side Hustle Pro on Teachable, by itself, this course is $297. But with your purchase of Podcast Moguls, you get access to this for no additional cost. So you'll get Master the Gram. And you'll also get the Goal Getter Action Plan, which is another OG productivity blueprint course that I have for side hustlers. This is the system I follow to side hustle and be so successful at side hustling while I was working a full-time job. So you're getting all of this plus Master the Gram, plus the Goal Getter Action Plan. And if you haven't pulled out your calculator yet, this is actually a total value of $8,553, but of course, I'm not going to charge you that. The full price for Podcast Moguls is $3,000, but for attending this promotional for attending this webinar, you actually get a promotional price of $997. So that's one payment, pay in full for lifetime membership. So you actually get over 65% off when you join today. And you have 2 options. Option 1 is a full payment of $997. And option 2 is 4 monthly payments of $297. All right. And I already know you guys are going to say, where do we join? So I'm going to have Joanna, could you drop this in the chat, sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. I'll go over, let's see, I want to move this, my little Zoom bar, so you guys can see. This is the landing page, Side Hustle Pro. You'll see on here, you have 7 days to join. You're getting 65% off. You'll see testimonials, student success stories, as well as a reminder of all that you're getting inside of the program. So just head over to sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. All righty. All right. Thank you so much, Joanna, for dropping that in the chat, you guys. So now, I know some of you guys are probably have questions about the cost of this, and you saw all that was included, but I know how that is. Like I said, I remember my first major investment in my business, and I did what's called the would it be worth it if equation to help me make the decision. And I only want you to join this program if it would be worth it to you. So I asked myself, would it be worth it if I made this money back? Or would it be worth it if it helped me elevate my brand and land brand partnerships? And if that would be worth it to you, then I highly recommend joining Podcast Moguls. Another thing you could ask yourself is, before I even say that, I just want to share that I actually have students who have amazing brand partnership testimonials as well. So this is Tolu of the UI Narrative podcast. She started out in this program with no podcast physically, no logo, no title, nothing. She started her show from scratch inside of Podcast Moguls. And so she went from just starting in her home, just like a lot of people, including me, to being sponsored by Google. And this is someone who didn't have hundreds of thousands of downloads, right? This is someone who just knew exactly who she was speaking to. And Google found her because she was talking to exactly who they wanted to get in front of. UI interface designers and engineers and tech people who, people of color. And that's exactly who her audience was. So do the work, make it clear who your show is for, and it will be 10 times worth it. So her Google partnership, she made her money back and more. You can also ask yourself, would it be worth it to you if Podcast Moguls helped you be featured in magazines? So that press coverage can do wonders for the downloads, for the reach, for the brand awareness. You can get more clients from that. So if increasing your downloads and reach and getting those features would be worth it to you, then again, highly recommend you joining over at sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. This is what happened to Shayla of the Black Girls Wine podcast. So Shayla, here she is featured on the left in Black Enterprise, and on the right in the Richmond Times Dispatch. So she has had some awesome coverage that's only helped her to build her platform even more. So like I said before, when I started my tacky blog, the only way to learn is through action. The only way I was able to grow from that Kayla K Speaks blog to where Side Hustle Pro is today is to start betting on myself and taking action and saying, you know what, I feel good about this step. I know I'm going to learn and I know I'm going to get better. And that is why I am where I am today with the podcast. So I also want to give you guys a bonus for just being here, joining, paying in full, and truly investing in yourself and betting on yourself. So I have a couple of pay in full bonuses for you guys. Number one is my pitch email that landed me my first $4,000 in sponsorship. That's included when you pay in full for the program. And I also include my 5-day branding blitz. Remember, I told you I came out the gate ripping and running my podcast, hitting those charts. These are the steps that I did to get there. And even if you have already launched, you can do this blitz to get on the charts. In addition, I share with you my pitch email to Apple that landed me in the new and noteworthy section. New and noteworthy is like that top banner that highlights different shows inside of the Apple Podcast app. It usually features really well-established shows on major networks And at the time, I was under a year into podcasting, was an independent podcaster, no network. And I just sent this pitch email and established a relationship and was able to get my podcast there. So this is a really important skill to learn. And you're getting this as a pay in full bonus when you join. Plus, last bonus for you guys. If you pay in full, you're also getting my pitch email that landed me my first international speaking engagement in Barbados. The power of podcasting is, again, you can use it to do so much. And because I started this platform and really started to see what my strengths were, I pitched an email to speak at this conference. Again, cold email, didn't know the organizer, knew nothing, but was compelling enough to be flown out to speak. So I got to speak and I got a little vacation, all because of this email. So this is included also as a pay in full bonus. All right. And we're about to get into Q&A, you guys. So stick around. Naya says, I'm betting on myself this year. Hell yes, do that. I love it. Come on down. Let me know when you join. All right. So Alicia Franklin, another Podcast Moguls alum, Dr. Alicia Franklin of the Research Her podcast. She shared the power of Podcast Moguls inside of the group one day. She shared her actual growth chart to highlight the power of the program. She said, I started podcasting in November. I had no clue what in the world I was doing, nor how to market the episodes. I just thought the people were going to show up. So many people think that, right? I'm not saying it's you, but I know a lot of people think that. And then she said she obsessed over the course and then relaunched a podcast within a month of joining the program with so much more vision. And so she went from hundreds of downloads to thousands. And again, she posted her growth chart so you can literally see that. She's jumping every single month because of the steps that she's following, the steps that she's learning inside of Podcast Moguls. Same thing with my Podcast Mogul alum, Nia Clark. She's another person who joined the program with an entirely different podcast idea. And through talking and guiding and coaching her and mentoring her, she realized she actually wanted to start a different podcast. She wanted to start this podcast, Black Wall Street 1921. And she, by 4 months in, surpassed 100,000 downloads. She even had the BBC reach out to her to interview her and produce a 4-minute short video with her narrating the story of the Tulsa Race Massacre. How amazing is that? And the thing about it, you guys, is if you don't do these things, if you don't showcase your personality, your knowledge, and all these different things that a podcast allows you to do, no one can find you. No one can find you with these opportunities. There are people out there who want to give you opportunities and want to give you money. They just don't know you're there. They just don't know what's in your head. So you have to put it out there. You have to launch it. And again, you have to bet on yourself. So the last thing I'll share about the power of Podcast Moguls comes from Shanitria of the Blunt Blowing Mama podcast. She posted this in her Instagram story during one of my last master classes, like right before. She just shared this after I'd advertised on Instagram, and she said, Side Hustle Pro is an amazing podcast coach. As someone who is one of her Podcast Mogul students, I can truly say she helped me get Blunt Blowing Mama podcast off the ground, grow BBM's IG page. She only had 3K followers when she started and now has well over 21,000 engaged followers. She also reached out to me when she started her BBM clothing line. And she just said that she really knows her stuff. And if you want to really build a successful podcast, then her Podcast Moguls program is worth the investment. And that is the highest compliment that I can ever get from my students, knowing that, they understand that it's worth the investment because of all the mentorship that you get and what comes from the mentorship. So to this day, there are people who joined in 2018 who still come back and check in every now and again for a little bit of mentorship, or, they'll be like, this brand reach out to me. What do you think? How should I approach it? Or I'm about to have this TV interview. What should I do? And, I'll quickly mentor them. Like I enjoy doing that. And I don't think of it as, oh, you joined 4 years ago, you can't get any more help from me. I think of you as a podcast mogul for life. So again, before we get into Q&A, I just want to remind you one more time that you can head over to sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. You have two options to join. Option one, pay in full. You'll get 4 bonuses when you pay in full tonight. Or you can do option two, 4 monthly payments of $297. It's slightly higher. You have 7 days to claim this invitation, because after that, the doors to Podcast Moguls are closing. And no, I don't know when they're opening again. People always ask me this question. So the price does go away on Friday, May 19th. Like I said, if you just go over to Teachable and join the program, it is $3,000. This promotional price only comes to my masterclass students for spending this time with me this evening. And it does go away. It does go away. All right. So remember that when you pay in full, you receive the pay in full bonuses. And to join, just head over to sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. Joanne has dropped that in the chat. Stacy, congrats and welcome, paid in full. All right. And anyone else who's joined, please do let me know. I cannot wait to work with you guys. Congrats and welcome. All right, we're going to get into Q&A now. So reminder of everything you're getting, you guys. Monthly live coaching sessions, my mentorship, okay? No one else is coming on live. I'm coming on live, okay? Annual community access, all of my sponsorship pitch letters and media kit, guest pitch templates, plus Master the Gram, plus the Goal Getter Action Plan. So thank you guys so much for staying until the end. Stick around for Q&A. And remember that Libsyn code I touched on, it's Hustle Pro to get the rest of this month and all of next month free on libsyn.com. Cool beans? All right, so now let's get into Q&A. Let's do it. Let's do it. This was just some reminders for y'all. All right, now I'm getting over to Q&A, okay? All right, first question. And anyone who's raising your hand, I'm just going to answer the questions in Q&A. So just go ahead and drop the question in Q&A, okay? All right, so Angel M. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to, hang on one second. I'm going to end the recording here. So for everyone, let me just stop the share real quick. For everyone who's joined on the replay, thank you so much. When you come in person to a masterclass, then you can get all the Q&A juice, but I don't want this recording to be